211
members on that Facebook page.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're live. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Think and Grow Rich Daily Hangouts. My name is Sandy Levesque over in Lisbon in Portugal, and this is a daily dose of prosperity consciousness, which you're welcome to join live. If you're in our Facebook group, you're new, or you've been around and you would like to come into the Hangout and read, you're very welcome to. Just click on the link I post just before we go live. If anything's not clear on how to do that, then just let me know. And hi, Glenn. We've just been chatting, but do you want to say hello to everyone watching who might join us and be watching the replay later?
Good morning from a rainy, or it's thundering and raining a little bit here in Tennessee.
Oh, is it? It is here as well in Portugal. It's very grey today.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, it's but it's okay. I don't mind it, to be honest. It's quite nice to have.
I don't either. I kind of enjoy it for a change, you know, for a change of pace.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you didn't have grey days, you wouldn't appreciate the sunny skies and blue skies as much because it would just be normal. So we're about to start some of the lecture notes from your Right to Riches lectures that Napoleon Hill did after publishing Think and Grow Rich. So shall I read today, Glenn?
Yeah, that would be great, Sandy. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll just yeah. Right, so I'll just share my screen. Okay, so here we go. Humility of the heart, based upon a keen sense of modesty. Napoleon didn't know of anything as wonderful as having true humility of the heart. When Napoleon thought about criticizing anybody for anything, and sometimes there were times when he did have to criticize people, but always inside of him, when he found it necessary to express disapproval of anything anybody does, inside of him he would say, well, God pity us all. For the grace of God, Napoleon would be the man that he's over there criticizing. Maybe Napoleon had done things 10 times as bad as the thing he was criticizing him for. In other words, he tried to maintain that sense of humility in his heart, regardless of what happened to him that was unpleasant. The more successful he became, the more he observed the feeling of humility of the heart, recognizing that after all, whatever successes he had was due entirely through the friendly, marvelous love, affection, and cooperation of other people. Without that, he could never have spread himself over the world the way he had. He could never have benefited the people he had, and he could never have grown the way he had grown. Personal magnetism, that has reference to the sex emotion, an inborn trait of only one of the traits of personality which cannot be cultivated, but it can be controlled and directed to personal uses, beneficial uses. The most outstanding leaders, salespeople, speakers, clergymen, lawyers, lecturers, teachers, the most outstanding in every field of endeavor, as a matter of fact, are people who have learned to transmute sex emotion. That is to say, to convert that great creative energy over into doing the thing that you want to do most at the time being. That word transmute is something to conjure with, something to look up in the dictionary, to make sure that you understand what it means. You're going to make discoveries about yourself. You're going to find out that when you really come down to answering these questions and giving yourself a rating, that you have certain weaknesses you didn't know you had, and that you have certain strengths that you perhaps undervalued. Let's find out about ourselves to see just where we stand. What is it that makes us tick? Why people like us? Why people dislike us? Napoleon could lay his finger right on what's keeping you from being popular if you are not popular. You can do the same thing. Learn to analyze people, starting with yourself. Find out what it is that makes people popular and also what makes them tick. When you do that, you'll have one of the greatest assets that you could possibly imagine. Going the extra mile means the rendering of more service and better service than you're paid to render, doing it all the time and doing it in a pleasant, pleasing mental attitude. One of the reasons why there are so many failures in the world today is that the majority of people do not even go the first mile, let alone the second one. Oftentimes, if they do go the first mile, they gripe as they go along and make themselves a darn nuisance. If you were like that before you got into this philosophy, you're going to get over it very fast. Napoleon didn't know of any one quality or trait that can get a person an opportunity quicker than to go out of their way to go out of their way to do somebody a favor or do something useful. It's the one thing that you can do in life that you don't have to ask anybody's privilege of doing it. As a matter of fact, If you're going to be free, independent, so just drinking some water, self-determining and financially independent at an old age, you might just as well make up your mind that you can never be that unless by a stroke of good luck a rich uncle or a rich aunt dies, something of that sort, unless you form the habit of going the extra mile and making yourself as near indispensable as you possibly can. Napoleon didn't know of any way that anybody can make himself or herself indispensable, except by going the extra mile, by rendering some sort of service that you're not expected to render, and rendering it in the right sort of mental attitude. That mental attitude is important. If you gripe about going the extra mile, the chances are that it won't bring you very many returns. Where did Napoleon get his authority, do you suppose, for emphasizing this principle of going the extra mile? What caused him to emphasize that? He got it by looking around and watching the way nature does things. Any time that you can follow the habits of nature, you're not going to go wrong. Stated conversely, any time that you fail to recognize the way nature does things and do not go along, you're going to get into trouble sooner or later. There is no overall plan through which this universe operates, and no matter what you call the first call of that plan, or the creator of it, no matter what you call it, there's just one plan, one set of natural laws, and it's up to every individual to discover what those natural laws are and adjust themselves favorably to them. If there is one thing that stands out above all others in nature, it is that nature requests and demands that every living thing go the extra mile in order to eat, in order to live, and in order to survive. Man wouldn't survive one season if it were not for this law of going the extra mile. Don't render $1 million worth of service a day and then expect to get a check for it tomorrow. Expect to get a check for it tomorrow. In other words, if you start out to render $1 million worth of service, you perhaps have to render a little bit at a time, and you'll have to get yourself recognized. When you're going through that period of recognition, chances are that you'll not be compensated for going the extra mile. Chances are you'll have to go the extra mile quite a little before anybody takes notice of you. Always be careful if you don't go the extra mile too long without somebody taking notice of you. If the right fellow doesn't take notice, look around until you find the right fellow who will, or the right woman who will. That's about the equivalent of saying if your present employer doesn't recognize you if you work for an employer, fire the employer sooner or later and let their competitor know what kind of service you're rendering. It won't hurt your chances a bit. Have a little competition as you go along. Nobody ever accepts a rule or does anything without a motive, and Napoleon outlined in this lesson a great variety of reasons why you should go the extra mile. What do you think Napoleon meant by the law of increasing returns? Substantially, the law of increasing returns means that you get back more than you give out, whether it's good or whether it's bad, and whether it's positive or whether it's negative. That's the way the law of nature works. Whatever you do to or for another person, or whatever you give out from yourself, comes back to you greatly multiplied in kind. There's no exception to that whatsoever. Again, there's the question of timing. The coming back process doesn't always come back very quickly. Sometimes it's longer than you expect, but you may be sure that if you send out some negative influence, that it's going to come back on you sooner or later. You may not recognize what caused it, but it'll come back. It won't overlook you. That law of increasing returns is eternal. It's automatic and it's working all the time. It's just as inexorable as the law of gravitation. There's nobody in the world that can circumvent it, go around it, or have it suspended for 1 month. It's operating all the time. The law of increasing returns means that when you go out of your way to render more service and better service than you're paid to render, it's impossible for you to not get back more than you really did, because eventually that law of increasing returns takes care of that. If you're working for a salary, for instance, it takes care of it in additional wages, in greater responsibilities, in promotions, in opportunities that will come back to you to go into business for yourself, and 1,001 different ways it will come back. Oftentimes, the coming back process doesn't come back from the source to which you rendered the service. Don't be too afraid to render service to a greedy buyer or a greedy employer. It makes no difference to whom you render this service. If you render it in good faith, in good spirit, and keep on doing it as a matter of habit, it's just as impossible for you to not be compensated as it is to be and not to be at the same time. When you start applying this principle, just remember that you don't have to be too careful about the person you whom you render it, to whom you render it. As a matter of fact, what you should really do is apply this principle with everybody you come into contact with, no matter who it is, strangers, acquaintances, business associates, and relatives alike. Make it your business to render useful service whenever you touch human relations in any shape, form, or fashion. The only way that you can increase the space that you occupy in the world, not the physical space, but the mental and spiritual space, will be determined by the quality and the quantity of the service that you render. The quality and the quantity, plus the mental attitude in which you render, those are the determining factors as to how far you'll go in life, how much you'll get out of life, how much you'll enjoy life, and how much peace of mind you'll have. Next, it brings one to the favorable attention of those who can and often do provide opportunities for self-promotion. The favorable attention of people. You'll go into any organization, and if you're alert-minded and take notice, you'll find out who the people are that are going the extra mile. You'll find out very quickly. Also, if you watch the procedure and the records of those people who are going the extra mile, you'll find that they're the ones who get the promotions. They don't have to ask for them. It's not necessary at all. Employers are just naturally looking around for people who will go the extra mile. It tends to permit one to become indispensable in many different human relationships, and therefore it enables one to command more than the average compensation. It does something to your soul inside of you. It makes you feel better. If there's not another reason in the world where you should go the extra mile, that would be adequate. There are lots of things in life that cause us to have negative feelings. This is one thing that you can do for yourself that will always give you a pleasant feeling. If you go back in your own experiences, you'll remember that you never did a kind thing for anybody that you didn't get a great deal of joy out of. Maybe the other fellow didn't appreciate it. That's unimportant. It's just like love. To have loved alone is a great privilege, and it doesn't make any difference whatsoever whether your love is returned by the other person. You've had the benefit of the emotion of love itself, and so it is by the principle of going the extra mile. It'll do something to you. It'll give you greater courage. It'll enable you to overcome inhibitions and inferiority complexes that you've been storing up through the years. Just this stepping out and making yourself useful to somebody. Don't be too surprised when you do something courteous or useful to somebody who's not expecting it, and they look at you with a quizzical sort of way and say, "I just wonder why you're doing that." Some people will be a little surprised when you go out of your way to be useful to them. Also, it leads to mental growth and physical perfection in various forms of service, thereby developing greater ability and skill in one's chosen vocation. Delivering a lecture, making up your notebook, whatever it is you do in life that you're going to repeat, make up your mind that every time you do it, you'll excel all previous efforts on your part. In other words, you're a constant challenge to yourself, and you'll find how quickly you grow if you go at it in that way. Napoleon never delivered a lecture in his life that he didn't intend to deliver better than he did previously. He didn't always do it, but that was his intention, and it didn't make any difference what kind of audience he had. Whether he had a big class or a small class, he put just as much into a small class as a big one. Not alone because he wanted to be useful to his students, but because he wanted to grow and develop. Out of effort, struggle, and use of his faculty came growth. Okay, Mike.
Yeah, that's probably a good point to stop.
Yeah, I think I'll just stop there. Page 6.
Because then it goes into the law of contrast, right?
Yeah, exactly. I just got the hit stop there. So yeah. This
Wow.
yeah.
That's all about learning to go the extra mile and giving, right? Really, because that's and I took a thing called cyanide. I think I've told you about that before, Sandy, about 20 years ago, 22 years ago now. And one of the things that the leader, actually the woman and her husband that founded this, her saying, and you can see it quoted if you go to Google, is "Givers gain." And I think that's very true. That's very true. That by giving, you gain not only just in your own, maybe you feel a little bit better about it, but it goes out to somebody else, and maybe they'll pay it forward, right? I mean, all kinds of good things happen in the world when you give, right? Wonderful things happen,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the book, The Go-Giver. by Bob Berg. I haven't
Yeah.
read it yet, actually. That reminds me, I want to read it. There's a book
Yeah.
about this, which has been recommended to me before, and it's all about this principle, how if you just make that a habit to constantly go out of your way
Yeah.
to
Build it. Yeah. Yeah. Build it in.
other people, then it's like you're creating all this good karma, I think, and then things can come back to you. And
Yeah.
like you said, it just feels good. It feels better than being.
You know you did the right thing, right? I mean, just that feeling alone in itself is a payoff. That by itself, right?
Yeah,
Like like we'll donate to certain causes and things like that, and I'll say, well, that's a good thing to donate to, and that'll help somebody. Maybe we'll never see those persons, or they'll never be able to give us feedback, but it's an open loop kind of thing. And remember, in part of the reading there, where he was talking about what you give to the world comes back to you more powerfully. And if it's negative, it comes back more powerfully. If it's positive, it comes back more powerfully. Right?
yeah,
So
yeah, exactly.
think about that. I mean, that's a marvelous thing. Marvelous thing.
Yeah, because we're all connected. So the way that we
Yeah.
act towards things, it's like if you're going around in a really bitter frame of mind or state of mind, and kind of, I think sometimes it's quite easy to get into that if you're feeling a bit down, or when you just don't feel very joyful, and then you don't smile at people in the street, you don't chat, people are friendly, and you just kind of like don't want, you just kind of
You're not
retreat into
giving. You're
yourself.
not giving. Yeah.
It's like you make your world smaller and smaller because you don't want to interact with the world, and that makes it harder for the universe, infinite intelligence, God, to contribute to you, because you're making yourself into a little hedgehog. So
Yeah.
so what he's talking about here is doing the opposite. It's like really being present with people, and
Yeah.
not just present, but also contributing wherever you can.
Right. And if we follow nature's model, remember he talked about nature in there
Yeah.
too. We follow nature's model. Nature goes the extra mile all the time, right? It overproduces. It overproduces goods, right? And so really, why should we fight nature? Why shouldn't we look at nature and follow it? I mean, emulate what nature's doing, right?
Yeah,
Provide
exactly.
abundance to people, to give good, and to do it not out of selfishness, but just do it out of the fact that we're connected, right?
Yeah.
And and we want to give some good to people.
Yeah, and I liked what he said also about, giving a lecture with everything you've got, and making it better than the day you did before, to use his example, because he was obviously giving lectures at this time when
Yeah.
he said this. And it reminded me actually of a while ago, like a few years ago, when I had just started teaching Zumba classes in France.
Yes.
I had lots of classes, and it was a very new thing in the city, so most people didn't know what it was. And I was doing a lot of flyering, putting flyers in city centres and bakeries and boulangeries,
Hard
and
work. Hard work. Right?
yeah. And
Yeah.
then, but one of the classes, it was actually a really great learning experience, because now I would never have hired that place. It gave me a really creepy feeling when I went to see it for the first time, but it was in a town I wanted to teach in, and I thought, well, and they had a vacancy, probably because nobody else would go there. And anyway, and actually, speaking of being aware and looking at what's going on around you, which is something Napoleon speaks about as well, is one of the dog in that center actually bit me the first time I went there, and that should have been a major signal.
Oh, the universe was telling you something, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because
Yeah.
they ended up not being very nice, and it wasn't a very nice place to go and teach. But I remember when I was just starting the class there, I did have some lovely students, but not very many. I think 3 students on a Friday night. It was a really dead slot. And in the beginning, I thought more people would come, and other classes I was doing were getting very busy, but this class just was not growing at all. And sometimes I would get there, and I would not really want to teach, because I'd know there'd only be 4 of us,
Yeah,
And I had
small,
this,
right? Yeah, hard to
yeah,
get
I'd have this heavy,
group energy. Yeah,
yeah. Well, I just would be, you know, teaching a fitness class or a dance class is a bit like hosting a party. You know, it's more fun when there's lots of people there. And
yes.
and so and I remember once I caught myself in the mirror looking a bit grumpy, and I thought, oh my goodness, this isn't fair on these women, because they didn't know there would only be three of them when they signed up to this class, and they've come to have fun, and they're giving it everything they've got because they were really good sports. And I just thought, I'm going to teach this class as though we're 300, not three. And this energy came over me. I still remember it to this day, because I called on this a few other times as well after that class, because I realized I could change my energy with a click of fingers. You know, I just thought, okay, I'm going to teach this as though there was lots of people here, give it everything I've got, and my energy changed. The whole class changed. We had so much fun, and it was just as fun as if there was, you know, 300 or 30 people. And I thought, wow, you know, we are really powerful. We have got that ability to shift the way we're looking at something, which
Yeah,
literally changes what we're looking at
yeah,
any moment.
yeah. You literally flipped it. You flipped it.
Yeah. And I
Turned
think
it
I heard
around.
that from another teacher, actually. I remember now. She said that sometimes she would come into her class and it would be a really dead atmosphere. Like people would come out of work, they were tired, just kind of, you know, zombies in front of her. And she said, as a teacher, you can come in and change the energy completely. And so and we can do that with, you know, in any situation.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention too, Sandy, since we're on this topic today, out of the readings, was about giving. If you'll go to Greg Kuhn's blog called, I think it's called whyphysicists.com or something like that. Go to that blog. His most recent post has two great examples for somebody to go and read about people that moved from doing a job, right, to become givers, even in their own job, in the job they were in. And read it. It's a wonderful post. It's a wonderful post. I read it and I commented on it yesterday to Greg because I admired what he did there. I thought that was wonderful work. And it's certainly right in time with what we're talking about today, you know.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
whyphysicist.com, I think it is.
Yeah.
Whyphysicist.com, and then go there and just look for his last post. Wonderful, wonderful post. In
Okay.
fact, you could
Cool.
even bring it. You could even find it probably there on your you know, on your computer there.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Ah. Well, that's the thing. There's lots of ways that we can apply this. And what Napoleon's saying is that, you know, he obviously felt this was important enough to mention it, and he's even saying, well, you know, people ask me why I talk about this a lot, and it's like a law of abundance, I guess, in a way you could say. It's like a law of, he
Yes.
studied all the people that were the most abundant at that time and had the most success, and this is one of the things that he found was a common trait, and that if you apply this, then it also reminds me, actually, if you apply this, then you can actually see a change in your own life. And Tony Robbins, he teaches that he tells people to tithe 10% of their income and give it away to charity or to, you know, whatever you feel called to give it to. And he
Yeah.
says that when you do that, you can't continue to believe in scarcity, because you realize that, like, each time you do it, it makes you realize there's more than enough for everyone, and that
Yes.
um, you know, that it will come back to you in other ways, and that it gets you into that prosperous way of seeing the world,
Yes,
which is
and you don't have to start with 10%. You can start right now with 1%, right, or
yeah,
2%, you know, and work your way up, you know. But you'll find out that even that 1% helps somebody in the world, you know.
yeah,
It does. And you know, recently we gave to a charity in Haiti to help pay the teachers' salaries at a school there.
yeah,
And
Yeah.
you know, it was kind of through our church, but I said, well, that's a good thing to do because these people are, and you know, they're not well paid. Those teachers, they're not well paid. So if we can just add that little bit of money there and get out something good for children, you
Yeah.
know, it's a help, right? You know, it's a help,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. Yeah. And this is like an example of financial
Yeah,
go
just a
go giving.
financial giving. Yeah, yeah, there.
Yeah.
This is
And that there's
wonderful.
so many different ways of doing it. So it's yeah, that's a great idea. So just to sum up today, basically, when you give, you also receive because you're not only do you have the pleasure in your soul of knowing that you're going the extra mile, you're giving more than you need to, but you'll also it's like you're building up this bank of good karma. You know, all these times when you've helped other people or you've done things you didn't have to do. You know, you let someone go in front of you at the supermarket because they were obviously in a rush and stressed, and you
Yeah,
know, like there's so many different little moments
smile.
where we can,
Yeah.
yeah, or even a smile can be something that brightens up someone else's
Say
morning.
bonjour or good
Yeah,
day. Hi. You know.
especially if you're in France.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
yeah. And even
Yeah.
in America, you can kind of throw them off a little bit, make them wake up, you know,
Yeah,
just fun, you know. Yeah.
exactly. Oh, well,
And then
thanks
the
for
other
joining
thing,
me.
the other thing out of today's, remember Jane Wilhite saying, "Givers gain."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, another way of saying it. Yeah, I like that. And I've
Givers
also heard
so
it described
simple
as the simultaneity. It's not very snappy though, of giving and receiving, because that when you give, you also receive.
because you're totally connected. It's because you're connected, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. We're all part of the same thing. So
Yeah.
if you're there, always willing to, water other plants, then when when you need watering, there's going to be loads of people that want to water with you, water you. It's it changes your energy, I believe. So
Yes.
cool. Okay, well, thanks for coming on, Glenn. And
Okay.
we have some viewers. So I forgot to put on the Q&A. Oh, mince, merde, that I just swore in French. um, so
We'll
I'll turn it on
translate.
next time. I turned it on before, but I forgot to actually be able to see it. So
How do I see comments here, Sandy? I guess I click on that little comment.
yeah, on the blue Q&A, I have to enable it. Oh, Chico's getting at me. He's so funny. He knows that even though the time has changed for the Hangout, he still recognizes when I'm finishing a Hangout that now I'm going to go and do something, and
Well, he's timing, kind of timing.
it's amazing. He
It's
puts it
amazing
up and
how
like,
good dogs
in-
are.
oh, well, we'll be back at the same time tomorrow. So if you'd like to come into the Hangout, you're very welcome to. Love to see you. And have a great day, everyone. Let's go out and be go-givers.
Okay, we'll be connected as go-givers.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, take
Bye.
care.
Bye, Glenn.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.